Hi, welcome to this special collaboration between Dead Air Live and Words on Film. I'm your host and movie critic Dan Burke. Usually I host my radio show Words on Film, which can be heard on Tuesdays from 1 to 2 p.m. on bostonfreeradio.com. Now I'm on camera, which is a little bit of a new experience for me, but not an unwelcome experience. And today on the special collaboration between Words on Film and Dead Air Live, we're going to be discussing the documentary Survival of the Film Freaks. And I have the two directors here, Kyle Kukta and Bill Fulkerson. I'm going to be interviewing them in a moment, but first, since I assume most of you haven't seen this documentary, I'm going to introduce the trailer to you right now. Here's a trailer for the film Survival of the Film Freaks. Take a look.
Anything with that disreputable lack of gloss.
Normal people don't want to see it.
They would only show that past midnight, and it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen.
Like the double-sized box that where you open it up and it has like padding around it because your VHS, can't hit the ground and it'll smash into a million pieces.
90s, let me just think back to the 90s. Holy crap, what movies did I do in the 90s? Oh yeah.
They were just, blasting cocaine the whole way through. It's still a pretty unique experience.
Most cult films were enjoyed in kind of an altered state, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Didn't matter how silly the movie was or whatever, they were gonna put their all into it, and that stands out.
It's like I didn't want to watch BMX Bandits 50 times in my life, but I had no choice because it was always on cable.
Everybody wanted to write the great American novel when I was young. Now everyone kind of wants to make the great American movie.
You wouldn't have said 5 years ago that a Netflix miniseries would influence the culture.
The technology that can bring a cult film into your house at the, snap of your fingers is a really great thing.
Who knew that movies would find a, just now a sixth or seventh home,
There's always gems and things to be discovered.
And here I am with the directors of Survival of the Film Freaks. I have Bill Fulkerson and Kyle Kukta.
What's happening?
Yeah, welcome to the program.
Thanks, man.
So the first question I have to ask you regarding this film, which I have seen, by the way, and it's excellent. What is your definition of a film freak? We'll start with you, Bill.
Definition of a film freak is just someone that likes more than just your average movie. We all like the Avengers, and we all like stuff like that. It's the type of thing where you're more invested in the film than just watching it and then forgetting about it.
All right, and do you have anything to add to that, Kyle?
Yeah, I think, people say cinephile, people say movie lover, film freak. I think it's just a little bit different than that because it's not just the cinephile who has to appreciate all the classics and, the high art of film, and it's not just the movie lover who goes and sees every, blockbuster that comes out. It's really somebody who wants to dig deep, those crate diggers who want to go through all the VHS tapes and, all the craziness all the out-of-print DVDs and all of this stuff that you really want to dig into and know more about not just the important films, but any film.
And how did the idea for this documentary come about?
We told this story a bunch. It's actually a great story. Kyle did a student film documentary, which we released a number of years back, called Phantasm. And he asked me to be an interview in it because I do a cult movie podcast. And it was focused on horror conventions, but we did the interview, we kept in touch, just, became friends afterwards. And I had a conversation with Adam Green, the director of Hatchet, at a horror convention. And at the time, he was ranting and raving about torrenting, and one of his films had just come out, but it had hit torrents, and it had downloaded 200,000 times, and there's all this money that's being lost. And I kind of played a devil's advocate with him about how things have changed with the internet and how, maybe it's not such a bad thing. Try to look at the light side of it, And then I just kind of, I've been a huge cult movie fan my whole life, and for, almost 10 years, well, actually it's over 11 years now, I've, done cult movie reviews, and just kind of had all this knowledge and had seen the changes in technology, even just from when I started doing the podcast. So I was like, this makes I would make a really good documentary to discuss, starting at drive-ins and then moving through grindhouse theaters, and then cable, and then VHS, and then DVDs, and then Blu-rays. And now everything's digital and on the internet. So I didn't go to film school. I had no idea how to start. So I wrote this manifesto that Kyle likes to call it. I think it was just like pages and pages of rambling about cult movies and talking. It really must have looked like a madman, right? Like, but I sent it to him and I said, hey, listen, I'm not sure if you're even interested in working on another documentary, but I get this idea. And I pitched it to him. And he lived in LA at the time, and I lived in Boston. So it was logistically already a nightmare before we even started. But so I sent him the stuff, and I guess you can take it from there.
Yeah, and I wasn't ready to do another documentary. I thought that I wanted to kind of, since I did that one for school, I moved out to LA, and I was gonna, do some narrative stuff. And it just, I was sort of spinning my wheels a little bit. And Bill is, we kept in touch, and we were good friends then. But when he came in and he gave me the manifesto. I could sort of sense his passion of that, and I
no punctuation, no paragraph, literally just 10 pages, top to bottom, of like, I like movies.
Yeah, it was, and it's, but you know what? Yeah, I do too. And I was like, man, like that's fun and that's interesting. It wasn't your run-of-the-mill like clip show cult cinema documentary that we've seen before.
We've seen that documentary.
Yeah, we've seen that documentary many times, and it's still coming out. We wanted to do something a little bit different, and or Bill did, and I was excited to see that in what he wrote, and I was like, well, I want to help bring that to life, and it was logistically a nightmare the first couple years, but we were really enthusiastic about it and wanted to get it done, and it was a great sort of reintroduction into documentary after my student film for me, and it was a really good introduction to just making something on film for Bill. So
not knowing kind of where we were going to go with it. Kyle was like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to shoot it for you? What do you want? I'm like, well, I want you to make it with me. I'm like, well, we're going to make a partnership. It's going to be 50-50. We're both going to direct. We're both going to write. We're both going to produce. Like, we're going to, you're going to focus on the filmmaking stuff because that's, you went to school for that. I'll focus on, the writing in the interviewing and whatever, the cultivating of the clips and all the fun stuff, I guess.
And it really was though, like right down the middle, exactly like the perfect way to jump into this project, to team up. We had a lot of collaboration, and we were really there to sort of bounce stuff off each other and to understand how both sides was going to work, how the interviewing was going to work, and then how the building of that story was going to happen. And I don't know, you don't find that all the time. You don't find collaborators like that. So, I was really happy that worked out for us, and we're excited about this and what else is to come. So.
And it was a nice change for you, just coming from LA where everybody's about me.
Yeah.
I was about like you, and then he was like, well, what about you? What are we gonna do? So it was it was a really good introduction, and we had a good time. We had a good time throughout the whole process. There was no point where we wanted to hurt each other.
No.
At least not related to the movie.
Yeah, no. Just the blatant violence between each other anyway.
That's a whole different story.
Yeah,
That's a different episode.
Certainly. So you, Kyle, were talking about a documentary you did in film school.
Yeah.
What was that?
So I studied film at Syracuse University at the College of Visual and Performing Arts there, and you have a thesis film when you want to graduate, and the idea
for your bachelor's.
Yeah, bachelor's in arts. So everybody had to do a 20-minute or less film, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Nobody was. You're in film school. We had like 20 people in our graduating class. Everybody's scrambling to figure out what they're going to do, and that excuse me. The beginning of my senior year, I had gone to a horror convention in Syracuse. It was a first-time convention, and I went, and I had a miserable time. And that wasn't like me because I've been to horror conventions throughout my teens, and that's what got me interested in filmmaking anyway, was just going to horror conventions and learning about directors and actors and all that. So I went, and I had a miserable time, and it actually stuck with me, and I was like, why is that a huge problem for me. Why am I like really down in the dumps about this event that I didn't put on, like ruining, time for me? So then I started thinking about what horror conventions mean to me and to other people, and that rolled itself into me wanting to do a documentary about horror conventions. So I did one called Phantasm with an F because, you can't take Don Coscarelli's Phantasm with a PH, plus it wouldn't make any sense to call it that.
But you can't take that Australian exploitation movie from the 70s.
But I can take that Australian sexploitation movie from the 70s. And Phantasm Comes Again was the second one, I think. Yeah. I didn't make Phantasm Comes Again either.
Nor are you Australian.
Nor am I Australian. But I wanted to make this documentary about like what horror conventions meant to me, and this was sort of pre-Walking Dead and pre sort of the second or third or maybe fourth coming of horror films, at least in like a fan convention way. So I spent that whole semester and then some of the beginning of my last semester going to conventions and filming interviews and talking to people about what this gathering of like-minded people means. And Bill was one of those people. We interviewed him at Rock and Shock in Worcester, Massachusetts, and which is what we consider kind of our home convention and home base, because that's where we met and that's where we continue to go every October. And it's a good spot. And that was what sort of let me finish film school. I did a 20-minute version, and then there was a lot of demand, so I did an hour-long version of it. And then I moved to LA, and I started working on this with Bill, basically.
And you mentioned that Survival of the Film Freaks is more than just a clip show documentary. Could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, well, when we decided what we were going to do, and we knew that for the type of films we were talking about, like, clips are absolutely going to need to be there. Yeah. But we've seen so many documentaries that just kind of live off of that. So we wanted more substance. So we knew that the transitional periods of going from format to format was going to really be kind of broken up by the decades. Because if you look back at it, like, 70s was drive-ins and grindhouses, 80s is cable and VHS, 90s is DVDs, 2000 on, you're looking at digital. So we wanted to make sure that we used clips to, obviously in the movie, otherwise it would become very clinical. So we wanted to entertain and educate at the same time. So we strategically used like a number of montages to kind of transition from period to period, and then use select kind of clips to reiterate points what people were making. So it's not like the film isn't about specific cult movies and specific movies that people love. It's about a general idea of that. So leaning on clips is obviously something you're going to love to do, because that time period had so many amazing, bizarre movies, and we used almost entirely footage from trailers, so that it's all the best parts of a lot of that stuff with the deep voiceovers and the like totally un-PC stereotype stuff that's like, you're like, oh my God,
horrendous.
This has actually got made. But we wanted to make sure that, we could have a little bit of everything in there. So if you watch the movie, and I know you've seen it, so it starts off very like in your face and like all kinds of stuff, but we kind of transition into this like educational point of like where we are, where are we going to go, how are we going to continue to have independent film, because one of the toughest things when you talk about downloading on the internet and illegal torrenting and trading of files, it's a very important thing, because it can really cripple the independent film industry if people don't pay attention to what's going on. So we wanted to make sure we got our point across, but still we're like, hey, listen, there's a really bright side of this and a good way to look at it. So through lots of hours of editing and choosing of stuff specifically, we made sure that we kind of really walked a good line. I don't know, was that the question?
No, yeah, that answers it perfectly. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I really did like about the film was you had some people who grew up in various generations. For instance, you were mentioning the people who went to the drive-ins and the grindhouses, and then according to them, when video stores started becoming popular and these drive-ins shut down, they were sort of lamenting the loss of that. Whereas as you had some people who grew up with video stores, like I did, and then DVDs came to be, and then you have the generation who grew up watching DVDs and so much. I like that a lot, and that's a great segue to the first clip. It involves videotape covers. So can one of you set this up?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things about being a movie lover, especially growing up in video stores, was being able to see the box art of a movie. That was the selling point. You didn't have a place where you could see trailers except at the theater if they showed trailers there. So they really sold you on box art. So a lot of people either fell victim or fell in love with certain movies based on the box art. So in this clip, you'll see a few people talking about some of their favorite box arts from the video store days.
I don't think you can get a better intro than that. Yeah. So let's see that clip.
We went to the movies. It was an event, but you could go to the video store 2 or 3 times a week. But I would say early 80s, mid 80s for me. So a lot of the movies that I've seen, I'd say about 70% of the movies I saw during my childhood came from VHS. It probably has as much impact on how I view movies now as any other intake that I've used.
You see all the art stacked up against each other, and it just becomes this beautiful collage of blacks and reds and deep, vivid colors. They're offset from each other. It's just like, oh my God. And that's how we used to pick out movies. I would not read the back of the box. I would just go from the cover art.
It was like this tangible thing, right? It could be copied, it could be shared. It introduced cover art to the masses, you know what I mean? I'm sure like people love to talk about the way that cover art really sucked them in a video store, I think everybody's got that. Everybody who's into this kind of thing has that one movie that sat on the shelves kind of just luring them in for years. Maybe they didn't rent it. Like I know a lot of people who just had those and I never watched it, but I would sit there and stare at the cover art forever.
Ghoulies, I think everybody remembers the little gremlin guy popping out of the toilet.
Where the remake of The Blob, that always is a cool one where it has the guy reaching out and he's back there. It's just gnarly. I still love that movie.
The Driller Killer video cover, the porno box edition version.
I really love the box art for The Hunger, actually. The original one, the double-size box where you open it up and it has padding around it because the VHS, can't hit the ground or it'll smash into a million pieces.
Vasectomy, the movie, a delicate matter. Now, Vasectomy, the movie, which is, what is this?
I think the cover of Gator Bait got me to go through puberty.
Deathstalker was one, because I remember renting it and watching it and just being totally what the fuck? Where are those 2 gargoyles with the mace on the front cover? Where was that battle? It was gone. Same thing with Warrior the Lost World. Has the sickest fucking VHS cover with a guy on a motorcycle shooting missiles. And then when you rent it, it was just so low rent and so disappointing. I think that was the time of just seeing these amazing artwork and renting it and just being like, what is this?
Anything that even sounded marginally interesting, you just grab it. You know what I mean? Oh, this is a monster. This says a half-naked girl. I'll just take this, and it doesn't matter. Even if I don't watch it, it cost me $1.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I didn't quite have the appreciation for VHS art until I saw that segment. So, was that something you had planned earlier, or was that something that kind of elaborated from the interviews you did?
Well, I think, again, some of the box art segment of a lot of cult cinema documentaries is pretty prominent. There's even just some documentaries about VHS tapes. So it was one of those sort of necessary evils for us, it felt like. We didn't want to go too deep into it, but we wanted to have a little fun montage, and that was one of the questions we asked all of our interviewees was what was a movie that was sold to you on the cover alone, whether it's good, bad, whatever it was. And we had our own too, and yeah. I think it changes every time we talk about it too.
Well, and the thing too is everyone wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
So it's we got to really look a great amount of stuff on it, but we also had to kind of pare it back. Otherwise, you end up having a 25-minute segment on VHS art, which is fine and great. But
wasn't for our movie.
No, it's not the story we're trying to tell.
Yeah.
Hmm. And do you think the art or the appreciation of VHS art went away with the advent of DVDs?
Somewhat.
Well, DVD covers were definitely a lot worse than.
They were lazy.
Can you elaborate?
They got lazy.
Lazy.
Because they were somewhere around the mid 90s to late 90s, and you could see this in theatrical art too, where everything turned into a floating head poster. where it was like, especially for horror movies. So it was like, I don't know if it was like Scream or like I Know What You Did Last Summer, like, but around that time, you would have the poster and it would be the black background, the silhouette of the killer's face, and then Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Freddie Prinze Jr., and then Matthew Lillard. And just like their faces, and with the like, who will live and who will survive, and who's on the CW next Thursday or whatever. Because like they were all the same, and they just kept churning them out. But I think the art kind of is, especially recently, has really made a resurgence with a lot of companies like Scream Factory and Vinegar Syndrome. And then the soundtrack world now is like, there's so much amazing art on like the reissues of the vinyl. Like Mondo does like these amazing pieces, and there's kind of like been a not a reappreciation, but like it was always still there for the fans, but now it's like there's new artists. Like I know our poster art was done by a gentleman named Joel Robinson, and it's based off the classic Maniac poster, which is one of the best cult films of all time. So, but it's, you know, when Joel, we was like, well, what are you guys looking for? And I'm like, we want Maniac, but we want it updated, and he was like, yeah, absolutely. Because he has that love for that artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's there, and it's always been there. I think a lot of companies, though, when they were churning out, you know, hundreds of thousands of DVDs, they weren't necessarily caring about the artwork because they knew it was going to sell. They knew that when they put, you know, Titanic out, or no, well, that was, I mean, the kind of like the last VHS, which again, lazy art on the VHS towards the end. The period too, because they knew they were going to move the copies, but like they're not working on putting like an amazing box art on the Friday the 13th remake because they know they're going to sell a bunch of them just to name recognition alone. It was always there, but it's coming back, and that's awesome.
Yeah, no doubt.
And another segment you had in this documentary around the same time was about films on cable TV, which I think came shortly after the VHS section.
Yep.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that section.
Well, it's funny because my parents didn't allow me to have cable until, true story, I had to con my parents into getting cable because I told them, I think it was like a sophomore in high school, I had to be like, hey, we have to do some like reports on the History Channel. So like, they're just assuming that I have the History Channel at school, so Dad, we should probably get cable. My thing came from dubbed VHSs. My dad used to dub the VHSs. He would rent them and make perfectly legal copies of Friday the 13th Part 4. But I knew I had tons of friends, and everyone, you know, would watch the late night cable stuff. So I always was super jealous of it. So, but I know you had it.
Yeah. I mean, and it was one of those things where I had cable, and you had, you know, the higher up you get, the more scrambled the channels get, and just the more weird they get. And so I had cable, and I was young enough to be confused by it, but old enough to be intrigued by like what those upper channels were all about. You know, I was like, I didn't understand the content, but I knew I wanted to watch it. You know, so and I think when we went into the documentary, we knew that cable was going to be something we were going to just touch on. Again, like we didn't know. You know, as any documentary goes, the story builds as you talk to more and more people, and the more people we talked to, the more important cable TV was to them, which sort of surprised us. I don't think we were fully expecting it. I think we were expecting the VHS box art, the video stores, like all this stuff, and the more and more we talked about cable, people, you know, going on to HBO and USA's Up All Night with Rhonda Shear, and you know, we got to talk to Joe Bob Briggs, and we actually pushed the issue of talking to Joe Bob Briggs after we talked to everybody else and found out how important cable was to them. So that was a really neat thing. I think that there's just as many movies discovered through staying up till 2 a.m. Because you're a kid and you can, and you have a TV, you know, that you sneak downstairs to watch. Than there are is to going to video stores and trying to rent something based off the cover. And a lot of, I'm assuming a lot of video stores probably wouldn't rent out to kids that young, you know? So then the way that they find it is they're sneaking around onto cable and then recording stuff onto their own.
I mean, isn't that how we all discovered the stuff we weren't supposed to discover?
Yeah, always. I mean, like
that's how I discovered ECW wrestling.
Yeah.
It was on like channel 27. There was the Univision station, and like you would just find these things late at night, and then you would just like, I know Steve Scarlatta said, like he would just put a tape in the VCR when he would go to bed, and he would just put it on Cinemax and just hit record, and then he would get this roulette in the morning where he would go and he'd watch the tape, and maybe he would get like a cool, like, you know, like a kung fu flick or something, or like softcore,
more questionable.
a softcore film about red shoes and diaries.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it is Cinemax.
It is Cinemax, and it always will be.
Yeah, speaking personally, I remember when I first got cable. Yeah, I'd wake up early at 4 o'clock in the morning to see what was on. I always felt sort of a sense of just excitement from discovery from checking out those cable stations. And do you think that kids today, like millennials, discover things that way, waking up at or staying up past 2 in the morning?
No,
Okay.
It's a different. It's a completely
the only
different world.
sense is that they could stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, but it's them scrolling through, you know, YouTube channels, or I mean, you can still discover things. I think the outlets are there, but there's a million more routes that you can take as opposed to the maybe, let's just give it 80 channels. You know what I mean? Like it's, you know, 80 channels that you could search through on your TV. Now you have millions that you can fall down the wormhole to. And you can still discover things, it's just very different. And the amount of information you get about that particular thing is much more. It's not just the film on cable anymore. It's like, you can get the film, the trailer, the IMDb page, the Wikipedia page, the articles, the reviews that somebody reviewed, and you know, the unboxing of their VHS, or not their VHS, their Blu-ray. Like you can get a lot more information about a particular thing now. I don't know what that does to the viewer or to the product itself, but that's how I think it happens. Yeah. You know?
I'm not one to hate on the kids today too, and like that was kind
certainly
of
not.
That was kind of a thing that kind of came up in the movie too, where some of like the older, you know, the old school minded people were much more like, oh well, kids don't understand how, you know, how good they have it. Well, no, they're not supposed to. That's the whole point of technology and things getting better and easier. I mean, for one, I love the fact that I can turn on Amazon Prime and have 100,000 movies that I can scroll through. I usually don't end up watching anything then because I'm like, well, what else is out there? That's the issue, I think, is more people having a hard time focusing in on what they really want to watch. But I think, you know, the world we live in now with the availability of things, I mean, I never got to see, you know, a lot of the movies that have become my favorite movies until they were able to be released on DVD or Blu-ray. Like, you know, films like the Jodorowsky films were out of print for years. You couldn't get a copy. It was like getting a copy of El Topo was like a big deal. Or like Sallow, like that was another one. You just couldn't get it for years. And those are movies that I love, so.
Yeah, I haven't seen Sallow. I don't know if I really want to.
No, you're good. You're good.
I've seen El Topo. That's brilliant.
Oh, El Topo is amazing. Jodorowsky is, I mean, complete visionary. I'm actually partial to The Holy Mountain.
Yeah, that one's a good one too. It's very out there.
All his stuff is good, even that weird one about the elephant, which is really
I have not
hard to
seen
find.
that. I'll have to look out for that one though. So you also brought another clip about cable.
Yeah, there should be a clip about cable, and it's actually the first introduction that I think that we have in the film about cable. So we try to set up a couple little spots about it. But I think you'll be hearing from Adam Green, who directed Hatchet. You'll be hearing from the gentleman who runs the Sci-Fi Center in Las Vegas, and Zeke Pinheiro, who is the producer of Fun Size Horror. I believe are all in this clip, and if they're not, well, they're still in the movie nonetheless. So
you'll find them at some point.
Yeah, of course. Well, for now, let's take a look at the clip for cable movies.
There was another thing that also really helped get people to see cult films at the time, which was also the advent of cable television. Because when cable television first started, USA Network didn't have, 80 hours of Burn Notice to play. They were just like, oh, well, let's get the Trauma catalog and show Toxic Avenger.
The first superhero born out of nuclear waste.
You suddenly had all these avenues for content, in need of content, and cheap content. And so movies that, didn't do well, that were essentially cult, became almost mainstays in home entertainment. Nobody would have saw The Thing if it wasn't for HBO. If We didn't have, if HBO didn't get, Big Trouble in Little China for cheap, nobody would have seen it because it just came and went in the theaters. Nobody remembers it. Nobody would have remembered it.
They would show them at 12 too, like you would see The Creature, some off-the-wall knockoff of an alien movie, and they would show that on Showtime because they would have filler. It would basically be filler TV. They made their money during prime time and during the afternoons and boxing and everything else. So yeah, there's a lot of the offshoot movies that I probably would have never seen if it hadn't have been for 24-hour cable networks like Showtime and HBO and then Cinemax and on and on.
It was Beastmaster, Dragon Slayer, and Ice Pirates. They were always on. And because they were always on, in my mind, those were huge movies. Those were like Star Wars big. Like everyone has seen these movies. And there was that running joke with HBO that it was, hey, Beastmaster's on, because they played it so much.
Friday, travel back in time to the age of darkness, to a land of mystical heroes and murderous villains, where one warrior leads the creatures of the wild in a battle against the forces of evil, the Beastmaster.
So checking out that film clip, I immediately want to see at least two of those clips that you showed.
The Happy Hooker.
Yeah, the Happy Hooker. What's up with that? I've never even heard of that
Hey,
one.
she's got a job, but she's happy about it.
It's based on a book, actually. It's actually based on a true story.
Shut up.
Yeah, we have Carly has the book.
Why do you know that?
Research. The cable, it was really cool to go into the cable stuff because, like I said, it was just something we didn't expect to go into so deeply. And then when we did, we were just like, wow, there's a lot that people remember. And there's even stuff that we didn't get to use because then we're starting to lean almost too much into the cable thing. We were talking about how it's going to be 25 minutes on VHS covers. We started leaning a little heavy on cable. But it was cool because I don't feel like a lot of people have talked about cable yet.
Right. It's nice though now because Joe Bob Briggs has had this really big resurgence because he does the Last Drive-In on Shudder.
Yeah.
And like people are like, yeah, I remember watching Monster Vision and how much they loved it. And it's really great because it's kind of almost recreated that community. Like you'll get on Twitter on Friday night and everyone's like gearing up for Joe Bob Briggs and they're like, I made my popcorn and I got my soda and
oh wow,
you're like no, like legitimately.
It's really really.
I mean,
cool.
I posted it. It was me that posted it, but because I like soda and popcorn.
Yeah.
But like people have really kind of looked back into that now, and because they broadcast it, it's not live, it's obviously taped, but like they broadcast it at a specific time on one of their streams, and people have gathered in. I mean, when he first came back on Shudder, he crashed their servers because so many people tried to log on, and it was nice to see that there's a genuine love, and people remember it, and like people are discovering a lot of these movies that he's showing, and he's showing awesome movies, like. Yeah. All of my favorites. Like he showed Madman and he showed
and he was showing new ones too. He showed Deathgasm.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like he's also bridging the gap between his old style of, grabbing cult movies from the 70s, 80s, whatever, and then introducing newer cult movies into the stream, but still, treating them, giving them the Joe Bob Briggs treatment. Yeah. So it's like a really cool crossover and like reboot of his old show. It's really cool to see that happening now.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
If you ever have a chance to see him at a convention or like when he does his one-man show, like I think he came to the Coolidge last year. Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah, he'll come back. Don't worry. Don't worry. He'll come back. He wants your money. Yeah. But his one-man show that he does, it's awesome.
Yeah. I'd love to see that someday. I know I've read some of his reviews, and he's probably one of my favorite film critics.
He's great.
Yeah.
Because he's so matter-of-fact about the way he does everything.
Oh, yeah,
it's
definitely.
just like, well, I'll tell you if it stinks, but like, here's the real reason why I enjoy it. And he did, recently he did what was the one a couple weeks ago? I think it might have been Madman, which I love. And he said all of the reasons as to why it's a bad movie. And I'm like, well, that's why I like it. And then he finished it off, he's like, well, I guess people like it for that reason. And I'm like, this guy just gets it.
Yeah.
Like, it's good times.
Yeah.
So regarding the film clip we just saw, you said before that a lot of the clips you got were from film trailers. But some of the clips you have here were stuff from HBO and from Cinemax. Were those, how hard were those to get? Or did you happen to use a site like YouTube to get them?
We
or-
did some from YouTube, some
Yeah.
just from people that had taped stuff and still had them hanging around.
Yeah, any yard sale you could go to, you'll find a box of
Just like stuff
tapes
and people
and,
just
yeah.
like
We didn't go that far.
No, but there was I think YouTube was good for finding specific things. Like that's how I found the Beastmaster one. I found somebody had posted just a reel of just promos from HBO. But like I searched through a lot of stuff to find those specific ones. It wasn't easy because there was just like, here is an hour and 45 minutes of just commercials from Showtime. Okay, let's sit down and watch it. All right, well, this looks good. This could be interesting. Lucky most of the stuff we were looking for specific things. So like, it was like you could fast forward through like, oh yeah, I don't need to see the 4-minute promo on Little Women or like stuff like that. But it wasn't
any boxing stuff. We don't.
Yeah,
need,
it wasn't as hard as you would think, but it was definitely time consuming.
Yeah, it actually kind of feels like a time machine to watch those
Yeah.
clips. Yeah, it really adds to the effectiveness of the influence of cable TV.
Absolutely.
But in terms of royalties, was that a problem?
It's the type of thing where we're trying to educate. So
fair use.
Fair use, and so much of that stuff now is just like, who do you even call to be like, hey, we want to use this commercial from HBO from 1983? Like, it's the type of thing where we know we're trying to educate people. So most of that stuff falls into fair use, and we're trying to help educate people, especially that are looking at internet stuff now, to be like, hey, listen, you need to support the people that are out there trying to make movies now. So we look at it as an educational documentary, which puts it in a whole different world when you're looking at that type of stuff. Yeah. So, but if somebody gets really angry, we'll find out.
No doubt.
But given the number of film festivals you've brought this to, you haven't
everybody
really...
is excited, especially film festivals, because it's really trying to show people how important it is to get out there and support independent film.
Yeah,
and the filmmakers.
I respect that.
So if somebody has a real problem with it, I will gladly sit down and have a discussion with you why we feel as though it's important to be telling these stories and it's not about a monetary gain.
No.
So you think the only problem people would have with this movie is royalty issues?
I mean, I think some people disagree with some of the opinions that come across in it.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
we do talk about a touchy subject, which is piracy. We do talk about that, and we talk about it from both sides. The documentary itself doesn't take a stance, but we do include two sides of that coin. We don't hammer home either one. At least when it talks about trying to find older films that you can't find any other way. We talk about the piracy issue, and I think there's reasons that people might not like that we even look at both sides,
Or even share that
information at all.
Which I think is a big part of the problem. And Adam Green touches on it in the movie too, where he talks about how Napster took over the music industry.
Right.
And if you can download a song, eventually you're going to be able to download a movie. Why isn't anybody addressing this issue? And they just kind of let it go until it got to a point where everyone was like, whoa, what's going on? Where's all the money going? What's happening? Yep. So it's definitely the type of thing where differencing an opinion is fine. If you agree with, piracy in one shape or form, it's fine. Like Lloyd Kaufman's a perfect example, whereas he just wants people to watch Troma stuff. He doesn't care where you get it. If you watch it on YouTube, you download a copy of it, you buy a copy. He obviously prefer you to buy a copy from them, but he's more concerned with getting the art out there to people. And then there's guys on the other side of it, like Adam, who again, his opinion is just as valid as Lloyd's is, but he is much more of like, well, I don't want my film to download 15,000 times and not get any money out of it.
Yeah, before it comes out.
Before it comes out, yeah. So it's the type of thing where there's two sides of the argument, and you can't please everybody. And some of the feedback that we got early on was, you guys aren't taking a stance on either side. You need to tie it up. Why do we have to tie it up? There isn't a right or a wrong answer.
Right.
how I feel about piracy is different than how he feels about piracy. So it's the type of thing where we want to share that information and we want people to make decisions for themselves.
I think where we do sort of take a stance on it is when it comes to supporting independent artists in some way. And I think that we take the stand when we, make it very clear that if you can't support that artist in some way, and especially an up-and-coming filmmaker or somebody working on an independent level now, then if you, Zeke is one of the people who actually says it really well. If you take and take and take, you're going to snuff that voice out. And I think that we might actually end our discussion on the piracy issue around that sentence, because I think that that's still very valid and very important. But you do have to look inside yourself and figure out, where does film and art and commerce and entertainment where does that all stand for you? And that's not for us to decide. That's just for us to educate on. And I think we do a good job of that without stepping on any toes or being overly aggressive on either.
Yeah,
either
I mean,
way.
it comes down to one of the things I always kind of like to say. I spent a lot of time in bands when I was growing up, and when you're out on tour, you don't make your money from playing the music. You make the money from selling your merchandise. So if you're an independent filmmaker, or you're into independent film, and you like, this horror director that just made this great movie, and like you came across this film on YouTube, or you got a copy of it from whatever site you get it from, but you like their stuff, but you don't necessarily are going to go out and buy a Blu-ray because you've already watched the movie. If you liked it though, see if they got a website, buy a T-shirt. Find a way to support that artist and make sure that And the thing is, buying a T-shirt, that more of that money's going into their pocket than if you buy a Blu-ray that's put out by whatever distributor, because 10 different people have their hands on the on the income on that, whereas most of these guys sell T-shirts or posters or whatever, and that's usually out of their own web store a lot of times. So I'm a big fan of just finding a way to support them. No matter how you end up getting the movie, legally, illegally, find a way to support that artist, because if you don't, you might not get another movie from them.
That sounds like an entirely other documentary. I mean,
it could be.
Yeah.
It does get touchy, and it was probably the biggest hurdle in our editing of the documentary. In our making of the documentary was that subject. But we also knew that that's the core of it. Like that
That's
was
the
so
most important part of it.
That was what stemmed the idea for you. That was what we wanted to talk about. That was what's going to make our documentary stand out from other cult documentaries. It was like that was so important to craft and build on and talk about. Yeah. So I'm glad that we did, but it was a little hairy there for a second.
Yeah, and and we've had a couple people that have give us a little flack because it's not the documentary they think it is walking into it.
Right.
It's not just the clip show celebrating movies. We're not going into detail on your favorite movie, and like that's just a product of the kind of the times we live in social media and the internet, where it's like everyone wants what they want, and when they don't get it, they are going to tell you that they have a problem with it. And again, if not everyone's going to like the movie, it's not it's not made for everybody, but it's the type of thing where it's like just don't dismiss something based on just your opinion, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, and you were talking about how you had a little difficulty balancing the certain things, like for instance the piracy issue into this movie. So the movie's about an hour and a half, is that right?
Just under it, yeah. It's like an hour and 23, 24 minutes.
Yeah. How much footage did you have to edit down?
A lot. A lot.
I don't know. I don't think we ever clocked in totally what it was, but I'm assuming
We did
we did 25 interviews.
They all ran at least an hour.
Yeah. I would say they averaged about an hour each, so you have
probably about 30 hours there.
I would say about that. And
I edited through 52 hours of trailers.
Yeah.
And then whatever amount of cable and TV ads, and like there's like the DVD commercials and like the promotional stuff that pulled in.
Yeah.
So we split it up though. Kyle worked on like the feature stuff itself, where I worked on all the trailers.
The archival stuff.
Yeah. So it was good though. I mean, I found some amazing movies that I've watched just from like different trailer reels that I came across. So that was probably, I think, my favorite part was kind of just like paring down the trailer stuff. So like there's like 3 or 4 music montages in there with a bunch of trailer clips. And so what we would do is I would take the 80s group and I would take however many hours and pull out a bunch of clips down to about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I would give it to Kyle and be like, all right, we need to make this 90 seconds. So we made sure that we had the cream of the crop in that stuff, like all of the interesting clips that we could come together. And it was just so much stuff that like we could have made those music montages 15, 20 minutes long each.
Yeah, it could have been that could have been the whole movie. It could have been the clip show. Could have gone totally backwards.
And you interview people from all over the country, maybe even some other parts of the world. I can't quite remember, but a lot of them are from America. I know that Joe Bob Briggs is from Texas. I know that Lloyd
He lives
Kaufman,
in New York now, though.
Oh, he
so,
does?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, how difficult was it to get a lot of these people from literally all over the country for two guys in Massachusetts?
It was timing, you know. We were able to time a lot of it. So, like, we have Luigi Cosi, who's an Italian director. He came in and was in Massachusetts for a film festival. So that was, like, score of, like, a lifetime. So, like, otherwise we never would have been able to get him. Luckily, a lot of people are in LA. So we made 2 different trips to LA. Well, I made 2 trips to LA while Kyle was in LA. And then Kyle came back and we went to New York a couple times. And then that was really
couple conventions.
Yeah, we went out to Vegas,
one-offs.
a couple conventions. So we filmed out throughout about a year. So we were able to kind of plan things, who's going to be where. And, you know, you send the feelers out for whoever you want to interview, and you obviously shoot for the moon. You know, you shoot for Quentin Tarantino, and then you know, what are we going to get? Who's actually interested? And I was more concerned with having people that are actually interested in being part of the film, as opposed to, well, you know, what's it going to do for me? And we lucked out because we got some really amazing interviews out of that.
Yeah, I think it's a good chunk of people who aren't usually part of it, who don't usually get to share their voice.
Ted Raimi doesn't do.
Ted Raimi doesn't
much at
really
all.
do a lot. You know, it was cool to get Karandu Mitsutaki, who has great cult material, who doesn't really get to, and like current cult material, doesn't really get to talk about his movies a lot, or he doesn't get his voice shared. And you know, it was a good mix of our friends and a good mix of people that, like, you know, you're gonna want to know, and a good chunk of people that we never met and now get to know and get to share their voice and what they think about cult cinema, which is very cool.
And you raised money for this film using Indiegogo?
Just for the distribution. So we did everything out of pocket for the production of the film. We did have some producers that helped us out on that end. And then for the distribution of the film, we put up an Indiegogo for a limited time Blu-ray and DVD. We met our goal, and we are currently manufacturing and getting ready to ship those out now.
Yeah, we wanted to make the movie essentially on our own dime, so that we didn't have to answer to anybody. A lot of films go into crowdfunding now and then either never get made or aren't able to come through with what they asked for. So we didn't want to go a crowdfunding route to make the movie. But we knew once we made the movie and had it done, we could then go to crowdfund, and essentially just the pre-orders, like Kyle said, was specifically done to get pre-orders out for a Blu-ray and a DVD. So we're self-releasing one now, you know, that's a limited edition, obviously. But we didn't want to go that route because everyone's going that route now with funding their film on crowdfunding. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We just wanted to make sure that we held ourselves accountable.
But it's so interesting because like people talk about development hell and not being able to get their films made, and I think that there's a crowdfunding hell that exists as well.
Now
you know,
there is,
it's
for
like
sure.
You know, you can crowdfund all you want, and then you have to, you know, then a chunk of that gets taken for the crowdfunding site, and then you have to fulfill any sort of perks, and then, you know, you're half the budget. You're half the
a lot of
budget.
work
Yeah.
to crowdfund a
And you're
movie.
trying to make a flick at the same time, and it's like you're half the budget of what you expected, and you have to try to make the movie again, and you're like, oh, all right.
And then you
have crowdfund again.
And then you have people emailing you being like, hey, I had pre-ordered something.
Yeah.
And well, we haven't made the movie yet.
Yeah. So it was perfect time for us to make the movie, get it done, and then offer something, the movie and more, to people who really wanted it, like right off the bat.
So what advice would you give to beginner filmmakers who choose the crowdfunding route, whether it be Indiegogo or Kickstarter or what have you?
Be realistic and be diligent. I think you really have to crunch numbers. I know it doesn't sound fun, but it's like you have to know.
It's not fun.
It's not fun
It's
at
not
all.
fun.
But you have to know what you're going to spend on what you want to make, and then also what you're going to owe people based off of that. Like, you really need to know what you're going to do about that stuff. Have 3 plans, you know, have more than one, like, spreadsheet. Like, know what you want to do, and then be diligent about spreading the word. Nobody's going to do it for you. Like, you really have to hustle and promote yourself. I know it, and I know that's something that I struggled with, was self-promotion. It's not in my nature normally, but like this made me have to hustle for sure.
So can you elaborate on self-promotion?
Yeah. I mean, we have all the tools available to you now with social media, with easy, you know, editing software, with things that are really consumer friendly as far as, you know, as far as being able to talk to people anywhere in the world. You know, you don't, you know, we talked about coming from sort of, Bill specifically, he was in bands and, you know, the DIY punk scene and hardcore scene and stuff like that. It's like when you're flyering posters all around your town, you only get that town. Social media is a way to fly your poster everywhere you can get to, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, you make it interesting. You bug people you didn't want to have to bug, but you're going to bug anyway because you want to spread the word, you know? You have to be a little aggressive, but if it's something that you're passionate about and it's something that you are, you know, polite about and able to share with people and you know, be like, hey, this is really what I'm trying to do. Like, I want you to be a part of it, or at least know that I'm doing this so that maybe you know somebody else who's interested, or you'll spread the word yourself. You'll be part of my street team and, you know, spread the word. So
And don't turn down help.
No.
Anytime anyone wants to help, again, hearkening it back to music, it's okay to play in a church basement because you don't know who you're going to play with. Don't turn down, if someone wants to help you out, hear them out, work with them, because you never know where they're going to be in 5 years.
That's some great advice. And we're running a little low on time, but I was wondering if you could tell me or tell the audience where you can see Survival of the Film Freaks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have finished a festival run. We had our last screening. Well, some screenings always seem to pop up, but the best way to know about those screenings is to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/survivalofthefilmfreaks.
All one word?
All one word. Twitter and Instagram is at filmfreaksmovie. We're kind of keeping everybody up to date on our physical distribution and the manufacturing of all the discs. Discs are still available on our Indiegogo. None of the perks are.
Yeah,
the
just
perks
the
are all gone.
DVD and Blu-rays.
Just the DVD and Blu-ray. If you just go to Indiegogo and search Survival of the Film Freaks, it'll come up, or you can find it on our social media as well. But that's the best way to keep in touch and to see what we're up to. So.
Well, fantastic. And if you could just briefly tell me what's next for you guys.
Yeah.
A couple things. We got a documentary we're prepping now about a local musician who passed away from a drug overdose, and he kind of left this legacy of music where he was able to reach out to people all across the country. So that's in the very early stages. We're going to start filming that at the end of May, and then Kyle has a narrative project.
Yeah, we're kind of dipping back into narrative. You know, we did a couple documentaries. We're still doing some documentaries, which is really near and dear to us. I think we really enjoy doing that, but we also want to get back into some narrative work, and I have a script now that we're developing and hoping to film this year. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, if it's anything like Survival of the Film Freaks, I think you guys are going to do a great job.
Thank you, Dan.
So,
That's
Kyle, Bill, thank you so much for coming to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it was great talking with you guys.
These 2 plants are clutch.
Fantastic. Well, I'm Dan Burke of Words on Film, and on behalf of everyone here at Somerville Community Access Television and Dead Air Live, thank you so much for tuning in. Good night.
It seems like more and more what's happening is people are kind of going into the past for cult movies. And I think the future of it is going to come from movies like what Neil Breen is doing now, where it's, you know, stuff like Fateful Findings, where it's done in this very genuine way, but ends up just sort of missing the mark and then having this weird back-end entertainment value and becoming something completely different. I felt like a lot of the recent sort of cult stuff where they take that approach of just trying to make a cult movie just doesn't hit it. You know, it's like they're just hitting the wrong beats or going after the wrong things.
If you take a movie like Sharknado, and if that movie, you know, I could see that if Sharknado was not blasted on Sci-Fi Channel and it was just this little release movie that came out in the 80s, you know, people would talk about it. But when it kind of, you know, kind of the light of wide stream distribution kind of burns away all of you know, the specialness that it had.
There's more, and they're more accessible, and people are also cashing in on it because, you know, they think that you can reproduce a cult film. They think you can retro-engineer that formula. So, you know, anybody with a camera and a bottle of ketchup and a fake axe thinks that they can go out and do a slasher movie, thinks they can do a horror movie, and therefore, you know, you do get some gems out of that, but you end up with more junk.
Whenever they're trying to make a cult movie, it never works. It's always from, you know, the Apple being a great example. It's like they're trying to make Grease or something like that. And then what that turns into is something very different, but it's still very entertaining. And you can tell because they had their hearts in it and, you know, wanted to make something cool, or even if they were just, you know, blasting cocaine the whole way through, it's still a pretty unique experience.
The Apple is success.
There ain't no prize.